boy in the striped pajamas. And I'm just wondering, where did you get the inspiration for your characters?
Well, when I was in school, when I was your age, we didn't actually learn anything about the Holocaust in school. It wasn't part of our history curriculum. But when I was about 15, my English teacher came in on the last day of class before the summer holidays. And he read us out a list of about 40 books. And he said, over the summer, read some of these books. You won't be tested on them, I won't ask you what you've read, but you'll be better off for reading them. And the first book that I read was by a man called Primo Levi, who was a Jewish survivor of Auschwitz. And he wrote a series of autobiographical books on his time there. And he was plagued by the guilt of surviving when his friends, his family had all died. And reading those books had a huge effect on me as a teenager. And it sparked an interest in that subject of the Holocaust that never really went away. Trying to understand it, trying to know how those things could happen in, not that long ago, in my parents' lifetime. And over the years that followed, it was a subject I read about a lot. I read a lot of non-fiction about it, watched a lot of documentaries, always trying to understand it, and never being able to. And even though I was writing fiction, I never thought I would write anything about it myself. But then one day I had this idea of just the two boys sitting on either side of a fence talking to each other. And I knew immediately where the fence was. I knew it was a place that nobody should be, let alone two little boys. And I was immediately interested in the journey that would bring them there, the conversations they would have, and the necessary end that I felt their story would reach. And what I decided to do was to inspire the characters. I thought there's very few characters in that book, as you know, and I wanted every character to represent something. So Bruno's grandfather, for example, was a soldier in the First World War who feels that Germany has been badly treated by the Treaty of Versailles. Bruno's grandmother represents the voices of those German people at the time who stood up against the Nazis and said what was going on was wrong. And that's the reason her voice is silenced quite early on in the book, because those voices were silenced. Bruno's sister Gretel represents how easy it is to be brainwashed, because she starts the novel, as you remember, being a typical little girl, she loves her own dolls and everything. And then the dolls go and she puts up the maps of Europe and follows the armies for no other reason than she has a crush on young Lieutenant Kotler. So each person was going to represent something, a type. And the moment where Bruno's father would recognize not just what had happened to his son, but what had happened to everybody else's son, and everybody else's daughter, and mother, and father, and brother, and sister. There's never going to be a moment where it's going to atone for what he's done, but there's a brief moment there where he understands, I think, the pain, because it says in the book that then the camps were liberated. When the soldiers came to take him away, he didn't mind what they did to him anymore. So I needed him to have a moment, I felt, of just recognition of what he's done. And if he never found out what had happened to Bruno, that recognition would never be there. That's my routine in writing. Firstly, I try to write every single day, even if it's just a paragraph. I try to keep the story that I'm writing moving on all the time. When I'm writing a first draft of a book, the only important thing when you're writing a first draft of a book is getting to the end of it. That's all that matters. Because the sense of accomplishment that you will feel when you get to the end of the first draft is enormous. It will tell you that you can actually do it. And you will look at that first draft, and it will be a big mess, but you will know that inside that big mess, there is a story that you can then start working on. So I would never go backwards when I'm writing a first draft. You have to keep going forward. The first third of a book, you're always excited by, and you'll be racing along. And the last third of a book, you'll also be excited by, because the end is in sight. But the middle third of the book is the hard bit, and that's where you have to keep moving forward. And the problem, the mistake that a lot of people will make, and will stop a book being finished, is that maybe 40% of the way in, you'll be tired, you'll be exhausted, you'll be uncertain where you're going, and you'll say, or one will say, I'm going to go back now and rewrite my first chapter and my second chapter and get it into better shape. And you're kind of conning yourself that you're working, but you're not. And you'll end up with just the most magnificent first chapter, but you'll have no chapter 8. So I would advise always moving forward, just getting to the end of the thing, and then worrying about what it is.